And then what's happening is Facebook is sending us back a response. And basically all they're doing is sending us back just a bunch of text, right? So like, if I want to view source, like this is all Facebook sent me back was like this giant blob of text, right? So how many of you guys like kind of understand how this process works? Okay. So I mean, it's really simple. Like all you do is you go to Facebook, you make this request, Facebook sends you back all this text. It's just really, all it is just a giant blob of text. And then your browser reads that in, parses it, and renders the page. So by render I mean they like make it display like how it should, right? So I mean really like HTTP is just an API for getting web pages and then showing them in your browser. But what we're talking about is a lot more specific, right? So we want to access the data that these platforms and these websites give us. And the way you do that is they have certain URLs which you can access, and then they just give you back a bunch of data. So let's look at Tumblr's API. If you go to tumblr.com/docs/en API, this is the documentation for Tumblr's API. How many of you guys use Tumblr? A couple of people? Okay. If you don't know what Tumblr is, it's just a blogging platform. Like they host blogs for you, and then it's kind of it's almost like Twitter, but more it's a social blogging service, right? And there's a lot of interesting content on there. So first thing you need to get started, and I encourage you guys to go along with this. So basically, you have to register an application first. Actually, let me describe what we're doing. So Tumblr has these different things you can do with their API. Like for example, if you want to get the info about a blog, you can just see this URL here, like api.tumblr.com/youtube blog /, and then it gives you back this text on a page. So this is what it looks like. That's all it is. It's sort of like the same way as just going to any web page works, except all you get back is this little blob of text. So this data format is called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. It's like the same syntax as a JavaScript object. How many of you guys have seen this before? Okay, a bunch of people. So for those of you who don't know, like any API you're using is pretty much going to be using JSON. There's other formats like XML, but JSON I think is the cleanest, so that's what the majority of these services use. When you get it back like this, it's unstructured, right? It's just a big line of text. There's no line break. It's just a giant blob. So a really useful tool that I use for like previewing these API responses is if you are using Chrome, you can download an extension called JSON Prettifier. So if you're a Chrome user, I would highly recommend getting it. So if you go to Get More Extensions, or if you go to Chrome Preferences, Extensions, scroll to the bottom, Get More Extensions. This is like the Chrome Web Store, and if you look for JSON Prettifier, it is this one up here. So I would definitely add that. This reading JSON like as an unstructured blob of text is like impossible. It's just not readable. So this is really helpful. So let's see. Okay, right now this is in unprettified mode. So if I prettify this, this is what it looks like. So JSON basically a brace determines like an object, and then you have like nested objects. So this is the overall like response. This big opening brace here. That's everything. All the data is encapsulated in this one thing. So any response you're doing, there's going to be a JSON object like that. The first part is so the first key is meta, and that's just whether like the HTTP request was good. So it was 200, meaning 200 in HTTP means okay. And if you're unfamiliar with HTTP status codes, you can just Google that, and there's like a whole list of them. And the Wikipedia entry is probably the best. But so that's how APIs, like, that's how you sort of communicate with APIs. Like, if it's not 200, then something went wrong. Like, that's not good. If this request went wrong, like, let's say Tumblr was down or something, then they would probably give us, like, they'd probably give us a 503, and that would be really bad. So the status is actually really important because, like, if it doesn't go well, then like we need to handle that error. Like if we're just making some kind of trivial toy app, then it's not such a big deal. But I mean, you don't want to read in data from a bad request, so this is important. Like you want to check whether the status came in okay, right? And I'll show you how to do that. So that's the meta part. And actually, the other thing is that this is not a standard thing. Like every API has its kind of own way of telling you like what the status of it is. So it might not be a meta key right there. And by key I mean like meta is the key and the value is its object. So it's like this key value system. Sort of like a hash. We use Ruby or Python implementation. So like Foursquare, for example, we go to their API Explorer. They also use meta, but instead of status, they just gave us status, right? Here they gave us code 200. So you have to be aware of what the structure of the data is they're sending you. Because the structure of the data that's being sent is not a standard thing at all. It's not like every API use is going to be the same. They're all different. You have to look at the documentation and understand like what it looks like and what the lookups look. So yeah. So all I did here was I made an HTTP request to this URL. And the other thing that was important is, I'll just go over this. So the response is the next part of this request. This is actually the meat of it, like the really important stuff, the data that you want. Inside here is a blog, and then the blog has different attributes like title, post, name, URL, when it was updated. This refers to a date. How many of you guys know about Unix time? A couple of you guys. So this is another thing to keep in mind. If you're tracking dates, or if you want to store dates, there's different ways to store dates. Like there are, like you could just say like 2012, like 10:05, like the hour, the minute, the second, right? Or you can do it this way. This is in Unix time, and what this is this is the seconds elapsed since like something 1970, January 1st, 1970. Unix time. It's defined as the number of seconds that have elapsed since midnight recorded universal time, January 1st, 1970. So it's not human readable at all. But you have no idea like when this was, right? But there are ways to convert this to a human readable time, and I'll show you how to do that. And so these are all the fields of this response, right? Like it will describe in the documentation like what gets sent. So for this one, retrieve blog info, responses, right? These are all the fields that you get back, and the type that they send. So string, number, string, Boolean, and Booleans in JSON are lowercase true and lowercase false. And so they show you an example, right? So like if you went to this URL, you would get this back. But if you don't have an API key, like if I get rid of this part of it. Now I get this 401 not authorized, and I don't get anything. So you need to get an API key. And what an API key does is it identifies who you are, right? So like, they don't want just anyone publicly going to their site and just like accessing their data. Like, if you start accessing too much data, they have to cut you off. It's like they can't handle it, right? You could potentially take Tumblr down if you had like hundreds of computers and just like did requests every second, like you could take them down maybe. So in order to get a key, you have to register an application. So you would go to this page. And I already have a key because I already made an application called Stuff. But if you want to use the API in your terminal, you have to get an API key. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And we are going to use Tumblr's API, so I would recommend getting it. And so the type of request we're making here is totally public. This is just like public data. It's not at all restricted by like user or anything, but like let's say someone's blog is protected, then they probably won't show you this data. Like if it's a protected blog, it's hidden. Like only the person who owns it can see it. Then you won't get anything back. So if you want to access like hidden data, like stuff that Tumblr's hiding from you, then you have to go through this process called OAuth. And what that does basically, and I'm not going to go through this because it's slightly complicated and tedious and we have to build a whole app to do it. But basically, like if you're building an app, like you've seen apps on the web where you click a button and you log into an application using Facebook or using Twitter, right? And the process you're doing there is called OAuth. And the gist of how it works is like you have this button, you click on it, it takes you to Facebook. Then you click OK on Facebook. Like basically you're saying, all right, I'm OK with Facebook, with this app accessing Facebook through my account, right? So you hit OK, and then once you hit OK on Facebook, you get sent back to the app you were just on, and then you're logged in and you can use it, right? So in order to do that, there's like a couple series of things that need to happen, and I'm just going to briefly go over it, not too much detail. But like if you want to log in with, if you want your Foursquare to have your app, your Foursquare app or Tumblr app to access information as if you're a Tumblr user or a Foursquare user, then you have to implement this this system. So what happens, like in a very basic way, like I'm not going to write the code for this, but I'll just describe the process so like you guys are exposed to it. So let's say you want to log in to your app using Foursquare. You have a Foursquare button, right, that you click, and that button will take you to this URL right here. And there's a couple things like your Facebook, your Foursquare app's ID, your redirect URI, which like I'll go into in a second. So what happens is, when this user clicks the button, they get taken to Foursquare, and Foursquare needs to know like where to send them back, right? So you have to tell them what URL to come back to. So Foursquare, when the user gets to Foursquare, they'll click OK, they'll get sent back, and then they're logged in. And then what you have to do is, for every user, you have to store an access token, which is just like, it's like an API key, but for that user. So everyone has their own key in order to access the site. And that eliminates good examples of this process.
I can show how I did it.
On other sites?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Matt will show you how he implemented OAuth. But I actually haven't implemented on an app like I've put out in production, so I'm not going to go through it. So yeah, so this is how APIs work. You're making HTTP requests, you're getting data back, right? So this is a sample, right? A really cool part of the Tumblr API is you can basically search Tumblr for any kind of post. So here I'm using the if you go down, right, so Tumblr, like, you can access info from a specific Tumblr, but what if you just want to get like really awesome stuff on Tumblr? Just like, Tumblr, show me anything. A really good way to do that is use the tag API. So if we want to look at a bunch of GIFs, we can go to this URL, api.tumblr.com/v2 tagged, and then tag equals GIF. So that would give us a bunch of posts on Tumblr that are public that are tagged with GIF. Another thing I didn't explain was these little parameters up here. How many of you guys know about the difference between like a GET and a POST request? Okay, cool. So there's different types of HTTP requests. So I'll show you again. Okay, so these are different HTTP request methods, right? The most common ones are GET and POST. And GET is just for retrieving data, like hence it's called GET. But you can actually pass in a couple variables, and that's given here in this URL. So we're going to this URL /tag, but then there's a question mark. So everything after the question mark is like a GET variable, right? So we're doing question mark tag that equals GIF. So tag is the variable, and then GIF is the value that we're passing in. And you can do multiple values. So for example, here, in order to get this response back, I do tag equals GIF, and then it's really kind of hard to see. Can you guys see that? Or can you can try it on your own if you have an API key. So tag equals GIF, and then we have to put in the API key. So then immediately after GIF, you use the ampersand to designate a new GET variable. So we do API key as the name of it, and then we pass in the API key. So that lets us do this whole response and make a request and not get a portal one. So if I get rid of API key, it just gives us not off, right?
I can show like how they can start doing on Twitter with that.
Yeah. So another cool way, let's see. So I mean, you can exploit these APIs on your own in your browser. That's the really cool thing. All it is an HTTP request. If you have the prettifier, you can see everything really nicely. So the other kind of request is a post, and we're not going to be using this, but basically a post is like, let's say you have a big form on a web page, like a credit card form or something. The data that you're passing is getting sent as a post, so it's like not going through the URL, but rather it's like part of the request itself, sort of like hidden in a way. But the basics are like GET is for retrieving things. You can add some parameters to like customize your query, but POST is actually for sending data to a server. And some APIs use POST, but most of it is to retrieve stuff to use GET. So there are a few request parameters here we can use, like before. Actually, I don't know what time to use before, but like before is going to want a timestamp. So it's going to want a Unix timestamp, and I can't come up with one off the top of my head, so we're not going to do that, but I can limit things. So with that. So like let's say we want to limit, we would do ampersand limit equals it gives us 20, right? There's 20 blog posts in the response, like let's say we want 10, right? Now there are 10. So what I just did was I used limit as a parameter for my request and gave it 10, and then the API only gave me 10 results back. So everything is going to be documented on your API's documentation page. You can filter here, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. So yeah, this is what it looks like. If you didn't have the prettifier, it would just be this giant wall, and it'd be so hard to read, right? But with prettifier, it's nice to see. So you click on this.